We live in an age where the greatest pain is not hunger, not poverty, not even illness. It is the silent ache of a life that is always rushing yet never arriving. Think about it. Every morning begins with alarms screaming, messages flooding, deadlines pressing, and still the finish line never comes. We run faster, we push harder, and yet deep inside there's a hollowness, an emptiness that whispers, "Is this all life was meant to be?" This is the cruelest illusion of all, that urgency will save us, when in truth it is the very chain that steals our joy, our peace, and even the love we could have felt in the moments already gone. What if everything you believed about urgency was a lie? What if the race you've been running your whole life was never real at all? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear may not only shock you, but it could free you. If this message resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe to Buddhism in every moment so we can continue creating powerful stories and lessons to inspire your journey. Part 1. The Hidden Trap of Urgency. We wake up each morning with the sensation that the world is already running ahead of us, as though we were late before our feet even touched the floor. The alarm pierces the silence, emails glow with demands, phones buzz like restless bees, and the highway outside hums with impatient horns. In cities like New York or Los Angeles, you can feel it in the air, the pulse of a culture that worships speed. Every second is accounted for, every pause feels like a sin, and every silence seems like wasted opportunity. We live as though life itself were a racetrack and we, unwilling participants, must sprint to prove our worth. But here lies the cruel truth. The finish line never arrives. This urgency promises freedom yet leaves us in chains. It convinces us that if we hurry enough, we'll finally reach peace. But peace never comes. Instead, what lingers is an invisible sorrow, the quiet sadness of being endlessly busy, endlessly tired, and endlessly disconnected from what matters most. We rush through meals but taste nothing. We answer messages but miss the meaning in words. We move from one task to another, yet lie awake at night wondering why we still feel empty. Urgency is not a companion, it is a thief. It robs us of silence, of presence, of relationships that could have been deeper, of moments that could have been remembered. Buddhist wisdom tells us something profoundly unsettling. Urgency is not real. It is a story our mind tells, shaped by fear and habit. It is a lens that distorts the way we see time, convincing us that life is slipping away unless we run faster. But what if this lens is cracked? What if the very thing we cling to, this need to rush, is the reason why joy keeps slipping through our fingers? Imagine standing in Times Square, lights flashing, crowds rushing, voices colliding in the air. You feel pulled forward by a current you cannot resist. And yet if you were to step aside, even for a breath, you might notice something extraordinary, the stillness beneath the chaos. The world still moves, but you are no longer its prisoner. Urgency is not a law of nature. It is not a demand written in stone. It is a choice, though it rarely feels like one. The tragedy is that we rarely question it. We accept the race as inevitable, believing everyone must run. And so, we move faster and faster, never realizing that we are only running in circles, chasing shadows of meaning while neglecting the substance of life itself. The hidden trap of urgency is not only that it steals our peace, it convinces us we never had a choice. But Buddhism whispers another story, that the chains are imaginary and the door to freedom has always been open. This is where our journey begins, not with answers but with questions. Why do we live as if every moment is a race? Why do we believe speed is proof of value? And what might happen if, for once, we dared to slow down? These are not small questions. They are questions that pierce the heart, questions that demand courage. For to see the trap is already the beginning of freedom. And once we glimpse what urgency truly is, an illusion, we cannot unsee it. Stay with me, because as we unfold this truth layer by layer, you may find that what you thought was necessary was never real. And in that realization lies the first taste of freedom, the first spark of peace, the first return to a life not rushed but lived. Part 2. The Roots of Our Restlessness. From the moment we are born, we are told a story about what makes life meaningful. It is whispered in classrooms, displayed on billboards, reinforced in boardrooms, and broadcasted across every screen. Busyness equals worth. If you are busy, you must be important. If your schedule is packed, you must be valuable. If you are always available, always connected, always producing, then surely you are living the right way. This belief is so deeply woven into the fabric of our culture that we rarely even question it. It has become the invisible script by which we measure ourselves and each other. Think of the child praised for doing more activities than anyone else, moving from piano lessons to sports practice to advanced math tutoring. Think of the college student celebrated for pulling all-nighters, juggling internships, and building resumes before life has even begun. Think of the professional in New York City whose worth is measured by the number of deals closed before midnight, or the parent in Chicago who silently feels guilty for resting when there are always more chores, more emails, more responsibilities waiting. From childhood into adulthood, the same message echoes. You are what you do, not who you are. And so we learn to live not as human beings but as human doings. But beneath the surface of this conditioning lies an aching fatigue. We chase validation through productivity, yet the applause is fleeting. We achieve, yet quickly discover that accomplishment is a moving target. One project finished only births another. One milestone reached only sets the stage for the next. The treadmill never slows. And so, we confuse exhaustion with significance, racing toward an approval that never lasts. Adding to this is the relentless mirror of comparison. In an age of constant visibility, we cannot help but look sideways. Social media presents us with curated fragments of other people's lives. Beaches in Bali, promotions at top firms, engagements under fairy lights. Scroll after scroll, we are reminded of where we are not, what we have not done, who we have not become. The illusion of perfection becomes a weapon turned inward, cutting into our sense of worth. What might have been simple contentment yesterday feels like insufficiency today, simply because someone else appeared to be ahead. And the truth is that this comparison is not reserved for the young or ambitious. A mother in the Midwest compares her family's vacations with the smiling photos of her neighbor. A middle-aged man in Silicon Valley scrolls through LinkedIn, feeling behind despite his own successes, because someone younger has achieved more faster. Across every generation, the same fear pulses quietly. I am falling behind. This fear has many faces. Fear of not advancing quickly enough in our careers. Fear of not being desirable enough to find love. Fear of missing opportunities. Fear of becoming irrelevant. Each fear feeds the belief that time is slipping away, and if we don't run faster, we will be left behind. It is this fear that gives urgency its weight. We say we are busy, but beneath busyness often lies a trembling truth. We are afraid. The irony is that even those who seem to have won the race rarely feel safe. Talk to professionals in Silicon Valley, living in gleaming apartments, driving electric cars, building startups that gain millions in funding. Beneath the surface confidence lies a quiet panic, a sense that someone younger, hungrier, smarter is already gaining on them. I can't slow down, one says, because the moment I do, I'll be irrelevant. On the other side of the country, in small towns of the Midwest, parents feel the same anxiety in a different form. They look at their children's endless activities and wonder if they are giving enough, if their kids will fall behind, if their own parenting will be judged as inadequate. Rest becomes a luxury they feel guilty for taking. Different worlds, same restlessness. Whether on Wall Street or in a quiet suburb, the pulse is identical. You are not enough, not yet, not unless you do more. This is the hidden wound of our culture. It convinces us that life is a ladder to be climbed, each rung measured against someone else's progress. But the ladder has no end, and the higher we climb, the more fragile we feel. Here is where awareness becomes a radical act. The first step in liberation is not to abandon responsibilities or reject ambition, but to see clearly the invisible forces shaping our restlessness. To recognize that busyness equals worth is not a universal truth. It is conditioning. to acknowledge that the highlight reels of others are not the reality of their lives. To see that fear of falling behind is not evidence that we are late, but evidence that we have been taught to live inside a race that does not exist. Awareness cuts through the fog. When we pause long enough to notice the story we are living, we begin to see it as a story, not as truth. The emails waiting in the inbox, the promotions posted online, the endless responsibilities, all of them are real, yes. But the idea that they define our value, that is the illusion. And once we see the illusion, it begins to lose its grip. The Buddhist path reminds us that the mind is a powerful storyteller. Left unchecked, it will spin tales of inadequacy, urgency, and fear. But through awareness, we reclaim authorship. We begin to write another story, one not driven by comparison or fear, but by presence and authenticity. The roots of our restlessness are deep, but not unbreakable. Every time we pause to see clearly, we loosen their hold. Every time we question the belief that more equals better, we free ourselves a little more. The greatest courage in a culture of constant acceleration is simply this: to stop and see, to notice that we are already enough, to remember that the race is an illusion, and to realize that in truth there is nowhere we need to be but here. Part 3: Time, enemy or sacred companion. For most of us, time feels like the greatest enemy we will ever face. It ticks away without mercy, slipping through our fingers no matter how tightly we try to hold on. We measure our days by calendars filled with obligations, by clocks that mark deadlines, by alarms that remind us we are always one step behind. We run, we hurry, we collapse at night convinced that time has beaten us again. And yet, Buddhism invites us to see differently. Time is not chasing us. Time is not a predator stalking our every move. Time is the field in which life unfolds. It is not against us. It is the very stage where everything meaningful happens. Imagine for a moment walking through Central Park on a spring afternoon. The trees are bursting into bloom, children are laughing as they chase pigeons, the soft hum of the city lingers at the edges of the park. If you rush, eyes fixed on your phone or thoughts fixed on the next meeting, you will cross the park in minutes, barely noticing what passed you by. But if you walk slowly, breathing deeply, you begin to see another world. The delicate fragrance of cherry blossoms drifts in the air. Sunlight spills like gold across the grass. The laughter of strangers feels like music rising around you. The park hasn't changed. What changed is the way you entered into time itself. Rushing blinds you. Presence reveals. Here lies one of the deepest truths of Buddhist wisdom. Chronological time and psychological time are not the same. Chronological time is simple, minutes and hours measured by the clock, days turning into nights, seasons passing. It is neutral, steady, unchanging in its rhythm. But psychological time is different. It is the way our minds distort the passing of life. In psychological time, 5 minutes can feel like a lifetime when we are anxious, or vanish in an instant when we are absorbed. Hours drag when we are waiting in impatience, yet whole years disappear when we live on autopilot. Our suffering with time is rarely about the clock itself. It is about the story we tell ourselves of being late, being behind, being unprepared. The enemy is not time. The enemy is the way our mind relates to time. This distinction matters, because the moment we begin to see it, a door opens. We realize that we are not condemned to live as victims of time. We can shift the relationship. We can move from running after time to resting within it. We can live not as though the clock were our jailer, but as though the present moment were our companion. Freedom does not come from adding more hours to the day. It comes from giving more attention to the moments we already have. Let us take a practical example. How often have you rushed through breakfast just to save 5 minutes, only to realize later that those minutes were wasted scrolling through meaningless emails? We do not suffer from lack of time as much as from lack of presence. This is why even those who retire or those with abundant free time still feel restless. It is not that they have too little time. It is that their relationship with time has been conditioned to be one of fear. The cure, then, is not to stretch time but to meet it differently. To explore this shift, consider a simple practice I call the 5-minute presence reset. It is as ordinary as breathing, yet it can transform the texture of a day. At any point when you feel the pressure of rushing, pause for just 5 minutes. Turn off your phone, sit comfortably or stand still. First, notice your breath without changing it. Inhale, exhale, simply watching. Second, allow your senses to open. Listen for sounds around you, feel the texture of the chair beneath you or the ground under your feet. Notice even the faintest movement of air on your skin. Third, release your thoughts from past and future, bringing them back to this one breath, this one sound, this one moment. You may find your mind wandering, but gently return without judgment. Fourth, place your attention on something ordinary yet alive. A cup of tea, the shape of a tree, the warmth of light. Fifth, after 5 minutes, continue with your day but carry a fragment of that presence with you. It is astonishing how much space returns to the mind when even a few minutes are lived with true awareness. The 5-minute presence reset is not about escaping responsibilities. It is about remembering that life is not waiting somewhere in the future. It is here now, within reach. These small resets allow us to reclaim time from the jaws of anxiety. They remind us that even in the busiest schedule, presence is possible. Think of freedom not as the ability to do more, but as the ability to live more deeply. We often believe that if we had more hours, we would finally rest, finally breathe, finally love. But the truth is that without presence, more hours would only become more noise. Freedom is not found in the length of a day, but in the depth of a moment. A single mindful breath can feel richer than a week spent in distraction. One unhurried conversation can mean more than years of small talk. One silent walk through Central Park, truly seen, can hold more life than months of commutes blurred by haste. The challenge, of course, is that the world around us does not slow down. Deadlines will still exist. Bills will still need to be paid. Traffic will still fill the highways. But Buddhism does not ask us to escape the world. It asks us to change our relationship with it. To see time not as something that must be outrun, but as the space where life blossoms. The clock may tick, but we no longer need to hear it as a threat. We can hear it as a bell calling us back to presence. There is a paradox hidden in this shift. The more present we are, the more spacious time feels. When we are rushing, hours vanish without trace, leaving us exhausted and empty. When we are present, even 5 minutes feels expansive, nourishing, memorable. This is why children seem to live in eternity, because they meet each moment without hurry, wide-eyed, receptive, alive. As adults, we forget this gift, but it has never left us. Presence restores it. So the invitation is simple yet radical: stop running from time. Instead, walk with it, sit with it, trust it. Recognize that it is not your enemy but your sacred companion. And when the mind begins to panic, whispering that you are late, behind, unprepared, pause, take one breath. Remember that life is not happening tomorrow or yesterday. It is happening here, right here in this very breath. This shift is not about perfection. You will still rush, still forget, still fall back into the trance of urgency. But each time you remember, each time you pause, each time you reset, you reclaim a fragment of your life. Over days and weeks, these fragments weave together into something extraordinary. A life lived not in fear of time, but in companionship with it. The core truth is this: freedom is not in more hours, but in deeper attention. When we give our full presence to the moment, time ceases to be a burden and becomes a gift. Life is no longer a race against the clock, but a journey within it. And in that journey, each step, each breath, each heartbeat becomes sacred. Part 4: How Hurry Warps the Mind. When life is lived in constant acceleration, the mind itself begins to distort reality. What is small becomes immense. What is temporary feels eternal. What is insignificant swells into catastrophe. In the rush of urgency, the world bends out of shape. A tiny delay feels unbearable. A brief silence feels like rejection. An unanswered message begins to pulse like abandonment. This is the silent violence of hurry. It twists perception until life itself feels heavier than it truly is. Think of a common moment, driving in Los Angeles traffic. The freeway stretches endlessly, red brake lights flicker ahead, horns flare with impatience. The difference between arriving in 15 minutes or 30 is rarely life or death, yet notice what happens to the mind. Frustration rises like heat, thoughts spiral into anger, every slow driver becomes an enemy, every turn missed a disaster. In truth, nothing has changed except the way the mind interprets time. The minutes themselves are neutral, but hurry makes them feel like punishment. Neuroscience explains why. Our bodies are wired for survival. In moments of danger, the fight or flight response sharpens the senses, accelerates the heartbeat, floods the body with adrenaline. It is a system meant to protect us when a threat is real. But in modern life, hurry activates this system unnecessarily. Running late for a meeting in downtown traffic, we experience the same chemical storm as if a predator were chasing us. The nervous system cannot distinguish between the lion and the calendar. The body burns, the mind narrows, clarity vanishes. Over time, this repeated activation changes the brain itself. Studies reveal that constant stress shrinks the hippocampus, the very center of memory and learning, while enlarging the amygdala, the seat of fear and reactivity. Hurry literally reshapes the mind, making us quicker to anger, slower to reason, more fragile under pressure. What we call impatience is not only emotional, it is biological. And the tragedy is that much of this suffering is not caused by real threats, but by illusions of urgency we impose upon ourselves. As perception warps, relationships suffer. We begin to see others not as companions but as obstacles. The slow cashier at the grocery store becomes intolerable. The coworker asking a question becomes an interruption. Even a child tugging at a parent's sleeve feels like a disruption of something more important. In this way, hurry narrows the heart. Compassion shrinks. The people we love the most become invisible, reduced to delays in our relentless march toward nowhere. And yet, if we look closely, we can see how unnecessary this distortion is. Imagine the same drive through Los Angeles traffic, but without the inner pressure. The red brake lights remain, the horns still echo, the minutes still pass, but the interpretation changes. The car becomes a space to breathe, to listen to music, to notice the rhythm of the city. The delay no longer feels like a catastrophe, but a pause, an invitation to presence. Nothing outside has shifted, only the mind has. And when the mind slows, the heart softens, compassion returns. This is the essential reminder. The way we experience life is not determined by events themselves, but by the lens through which we see them. Hurry is a cracked lens, distorting and exaggerating until joy disappears. Slowing down repairs the lens, allowing us to see reality as it is, manageable, often beautiful, rarely catastrophic. When we release the grip of urgency, we regain the ability to respond wisely rather than react blindly. The cost of not seeing this is profound. Entire lives are lived in a blur, where days vanish into exhaustion and nights dissolve into restless sleep. People look back and wonder where the years went, why moments of connection were so few, why love was spoken of but rarely felt. The answer often lies not in the absence of time, but in the distortion of it. Hurry robs us not only of peace but of meaning, but the possibility of healing is just as profound. When we choose to slow down, even briefly, we give the nervous system permission to rest. The breath deepens, the body remembers safety, the mind clears. Neuroscience shows that with mindful pauses, the prefrontal cortex, the seat of clarity and compassion, reawakens. In those moments, patience grows naturally, understanding blossoms, kindness becomes possible again. To live without hurry is not to abandon responsibility. It is to restore balance. It is to recognize that arriving 10 minutes late is not worth sacrificing peace, that finishing one more email is not worth losing tenderness, that life itself is too precious to be distorted by speed. Every time we choose to slow down, we reclaim not only our minds but our humanity. And so the lesson is simple yet radical. Hurry warps the mind, but stillness restores it. In stillness, delays are no longer disasters, people are no longer obstacles, and time is no longer an enemy. In stillness, the heart opens again and compassion returns to its rightful place. To slow down is not to fall behind. It is to finally see clearly, to live fully, to love deeply. It is to remember that life was never meant to be a race but a journey of presence. Part 5: Hurry and Anxiety, the Silent Partnership. There is a storm that brews quietly inside us, invisible to the world yet relentless in its grip. It is the storm of hurry feeding anxiety, and anxiety feeding hurry, until both become indistinguishable. To live in constant rush is to keep the body in a state of alarm, and when the body learns to stay alarmed, anxiety becomes a permanent companion. We rush because we are anxious, and we are anxious because we rush. It is a vicious circle so subtle we rarely see it, yet so powerful it steals the very ground from beneath us. Think of how many people carry this storm even into spaces meant for rest. A family on vacation in Hawaii, surrounded by the turquoise ocean, golden beaches, and sunsets so breathtaking they look painted by eternity itself, should feel ease. But watch closely. Phones in hand, emails still being answered. Children tugging at their parents, but the parents' minds are elsewhere, replaying unfinished tasks or worrying about what awaits at the office. They are in paradise, yet they cannot unplug. Their bodies may be on the sand, but their nervous systems are still running a race. This is the tragedy of hurry and anxiety. They follow us wherever we go, making even rest another task to accomplish, another item on the checklist of a hurried life. The reason is deeply biological. Hurry mimics danger. Each time we rush, our bodies enter fight or flight mode. The heart races, breathing becomes shallow, cortisol floods the bloodstream. It does not matter whether the threat is a wild animal or a late meeting. The body responds as if life itself were at stake. And once this pattern repeats often enough, the body begins to expect it. Anxiety becomes the default setting, humming beneath the surface of every moment, waiting for the next excuse to surge forward. The rush and the worry become inseparable, a silent partnership that convinces us that slowing down is unsafe. But the truth is the opposite. Stillness is not danger. Stillness is healing. The mind, however, has been trained to resist it. Sit quietly for even 5 minutes and notice what happens. A whisper begins, telling you to check your phone, to move, to do something. That whisper is not wisdom, it is conditioning. It is the echo of years of teaching ourselves that value comes from motion, that safety comes from speed, that being still is wasting time. Breaking free requires us to see this whisper for what it is, a habit of thought, not a command. To picture this partnership of hurry and anxiety, imagine a river after a storm. The current rushes violently, carrying branches, debris, mud, and noise. Stand close to it, and it feels overwhelming, impossible to survive. This is what life feels like when we live in hurry, the river of time crashing against us, anxiety pulling us under. But step back even a little and you begin to notice the truth. Beneath the surface chaos, the river has depth. It flows, yes, but it also continues steadily, calmly beneath the froth. Now imagine a still lake nearby, its surface reflecting the sky like a mirror. This lake is the presence waiting in us when we step away from hurry. The rushing river of anxiety and the calm lake of stillness exist side by side. Which one we live in depends on where we choose to stand. The choice, however, does not come naturally. It must be practiced. One of the simplest and most transformative practices can be done anywhere, even in the most hurried spaces. Imagine yourself standing in line at a Starbucks, waiting for your morning coffee. Around you, baristas call out orders, people tap their feet impatiently, phones light up with constant notifications. This is the perfect moment to practice grounding. Instead of checking your phone or rehearsing your day's anxieties, try this. Take a slow breath in, feeling the air fill your lungs. Notice the ground beneath your feet, the solid floor holding your weight. Let your awareness travel down your body slowly, like a gentle scan, noticing your shoulders, your chest, your stomach, your legs. Do not judge what you feel, simply notice. For even 2 or 3 minutes you step out of the river and into the lake. You discover that calm is not somewhere else. It is right here beneath the surface of hurry. These tiny practices matter more than we think. They are not trivial interruptions, they are lifelines. Every pause interrupts the cycle, reminding the body that not everything is an emergency, that safety exists in stillness, that presence is possible even in chaos. Over time, the nervous system relearns balance. The fight or flight reflex no longer controls every breath. Anxiety loosens its grip. Hurry loses its power. And we begin to experience life not as a race to outrun fear, but as a journey to walk with awareness. The deeper teaching here is that healing begins not when we conquer anxiety by doing more, but when we learn to stop running from it. Anxiety thrives in avoidance. The more we resist stillness, the more we confirm its lie that stillness is unsafe. But when we turn toward it, when we breathe into it, when we allow silence to unfold, we discover something extraordinary. The storm was never as dangerous as we believed. The mind is noisy, yes, but beneath the noise there is always a calm lake, waiting. Freedom does not come from outrunning the river. It comes from remembering the lake. And every time we choose to pause, to breathe in line at Starbucks, to sit quietly with a cup of tea, to watch the sunset without checking the time, we step back from the storm and return to ourselves. This is the hidden power of stillness. It is not laziness, not passivity, not wasted time. It is medicine for a hurried soul. It is the doorway through which peace re-enters a life that has forgotten how to rest. Hurry and anxiety will always invite us to run faster, to do more, to fear silence. But the invitation of Buddhism is gentler, deeper, wiser. Stop, breathe, and remember. Stillness is not danger. Stillness is healing. And when we trust it, even for a moment, we find that the river calms, the storm quiets, and the heart begins to feel whole again. Part 6. The Illusion of Control Through Speed. One of the deepest illusions we carry in our modern world is the belief that if we move faster, we will finally master life. Somewhere inside us is a voice whispering, if I can just get ahead of the schedule, answer every message, finish every task, then I'll finally feel safe, finally feel free. We equate speed with mastery, mistaking constant reaction for control. Yet the more we try to outrun uncertainty, the more it multiplies and the less control we truly have. Look at the way we use our phones. Studies show people check their devices hundreds of times a day, each glance driven by the illusion that staying updated equals staying in control. We believe that if we respond instantly to an email, check every notification, scroll through every update, we will prevent chaos from overtaking us. But what actually happens? Our attention shatters. Anxiety rises. The more we chase information, the less clarity we possess. The very tool we clutch for stability becomes the device through which we scatter our minds. Speed does not give us mastery. It only convinces us for a moment that we are not falling behind. The truth is beautifully revealed in a metaphor. Trying to control life by moving faster is like trying to calm the ocean waves with our hands. No matter how frantically we splash and push, the waves continue their rhythm, indifferent to our effort. The ocean is vast, its movements far beyond our command. But step back and observe, and suddenly the waves no longer appear as threats. They are simply the nature of the sea. Likewise, life is not meant to be subdued by speed. It cannot be tamed by reaction. It can only be met with clarity and awareness. What then is real control? It is not answering messages in seconds or completing tasks at lightning speed. Real control is the ability to remain steady when life shifts, to act with clarity instead of panic, to choose wisely rather than react blindly. A person who pauses, breathes, and responds with awareness holds more mastery than one who moves with frantic urgency. True control arises from presence, not speed. This teaching is not abstract. It demands practice. In a world where devices constantly demand attention, we must set boundaries that remind us who is in charge. One powerful activity is to create sacred no-phone zones. These are spaces or times in which you refuse to let technology dictate your attention. Perhaps it is your dining table, where meals become rituals of presence instead of hurried consumption between messages. Perhaps it is the first hour after waking, when you greet the day with breath and silence instead of screens. Perhaps it is the hour before bed, when you allow the mind to rest without blue light stealing your final thoughts. These sacred zones are not about rejecting technology, but about reclaiming authority over your time and attention. The effect of such boundaries is profound. At first, it feels uncomfortable, even frightening. You may feel you are missing something, that opportunities are slipping away. But as days pass, you begin to notice a shift. Clarity returns. Anxiety eases. Conversations become deeper, meals richer, mornings calmer. You discover that the world does not collapse when you fail to check every notification, that life continues to flow even when you are not racing to manage it. In fact, you begin to see that the very control you longed for emerges naturally once you stop grasping for it. This is the paradox the Buddha pointed to. The more tightly we cling, the less secure we feel. The more we rush to control, the more unstable life becomes. But when we let go, when we step back with awareness, we discover stability that cannot be shaken. The waves of life continue, but we are no longer thrashing in the water. We are standing calmly on the shore, watching, breathing steady. So the invitation is simple. Stop equating speed with mastery. Mastery is not in the frantic motion of hands, but in the quiet clarity of the heart. The next time you feel the impulse to check your phone yet again, pause, breathe, ask yourself, what am I really seeking? Is it information or is it reassurance? Notice that the reassurance never lasts. True safety cannot be found in speed. It can only be found in awareness. In the end, the illusion of control through speed leaves us exhausted, disconnected, and enslaved to the very pace we thought would save us. But clarity, awareness, and presence return us to real power. To live without this illusion is to live with freedom, to taste moments fully, to act with wisdom, and to trust that life, like the ocean, was never meant to be controlled, only embraced. The practice of creating digital boundaries and honoring sacred no-phone zones is not just a lifestyle choice. It is a spiritual act of remembering that you are not a slave to urgency. It is an act of rebellion against the illusion that faster is safer. And it is a return to the truth that mastery lies not in controlling life's waves, but in learning to meet them with a steady, present heart. Part 7. Breaking the Cycle of Exhaustion. There is a peculiar kind of weariness that has become the silent signature of modern life. It is not the tiredness that comes from meaningful labor or the fatigue that follows a day of creation. It is a deeper exhaustion, one that seeps into the soul. It is the feeling of collapsing into bed at night and whispering to yourself, "Where did the day go?" Hours vanished, yet little feels accomplished. This exhaustion is not progress. It is a treadmill disguised as a journey. Hurry convinces us we are moving forward, but the truth is harsher. We are running in place, repeating patterns, mistaking motion for meaning. This cycle is devastating because it offers no satisfaction. Imagine a hamster spinning endlessly in its wheel. The creature runs with all its might, but the scenery never changes. We are not so different. We sprint through emails, errands, meetings, and chores, believing each completed task will bring relief. Instead, the momentary relief evaporates and the next urgency appears. The treadmill never stops, and we never truly arrive. The cruelest part is that this running leaves us too depleted to enjoy the very life we claim to be building. There is, however, an insight that shatters the illusion. Life does not collapse when we pause. Sometimes it blossoms. We fear that slowing down will unravel everything, that if we stop, the world will fall apart. Yet when we dare to pause, the opposite often unfolds. Projects still get finished. Responsibilities still get met. The sun still rises. What changes is not the outer world, but the inner one. Space returns. Clarity sharpens. The heart remembers joy. Consider the culture of the Parisian cafe. In that city, slowness has been cultivated into an art. People linger over coffee for hours, savoring conversation, observing life, simply being. A cafe table is not merely a place to fuel the body, it is a stage for presence. There, one discovers that time stretches when it is met with openness. A single cup of espresso becomes an entire afternoon of reflection, intimacy, and aliveness. The French do not live with less to-dos than the rest of us. They live with the courage to pause. They demonstrate that rest is not the enemy of productivity. It is the soul of living. We, too, can taste this art if we dare to break the cycle. One way is through what I call micro-pauses. These are tiny interruptions in the momentum of hurry, moments so small they may seem inconsequential, yet they carry the power to rewire the entire rhythm of a day. Before sending the next email, close your eyes and breathe deeply once. Before answering the phone, let it ring twice as you ground yourself. Between tasks, sit silently for 30 seconds, letting the previous moment dissolve before entering the next. These micro-pauses remind the body that it is safe to rest, remind the mind that it is allowed to be still, and remind the soul that life is more than tasks. The practice of micro-pauses exposes the great lie of exhaustion, that the only way to live is to keep moving. When we pause, we see that rest is not laziness. It is nourishment. It is alignment. It is choosing depth over speed. Slowly, the treadmill begins to lose its grip. The cycle of exhaustion cracks open, revealing a space where breath returns, where moments expand, where joy has room to appear. Breaking the cycle is not about abandoning all responsibility. It is about remembering that we are not machines. We were not designed to function without rhythm, without silence, without rest. When we accept this truth, we no longer measure our lives by how much we do, but by how fully we live. We begin to trade the question, what did I accomplish today? For the deeper one, how present was I today? And in this shift lies freedom. The cycle of exhaustion thrives on blindness. It feeds on our unquestioned belief that more equals better, that faster equals worthier, that busy equals alive. But the moment we see it, the illusion begins to unravel. The hamster wheel is revealed for what it is, motion without meaning. And in that moment of recognition, a doorway opens, a doorway into a life no longer wasted in constant running, but enriched by the courage to pause. To step through that doorway is to embrace a radical truth. Exhaustion is not inevitable. It is a choice sustained by illusion. And once we choose differently, once we honor pauses, savor presence, and allow slowness, we break the cycle. We return to ourselves. And we finally remember that life is not meant to be survived in a blur, but lived with eyes open, heart steady, and soul at rest. Part 8. The Rebellion of Slowing Down. To live slowly in a society obsessed with speed is nothing short of an act of rebellion. We live in a culture where acceleration is praised, multitasking is glorified, and stillness is often mistaken for laziness. Everywhere we turn, the message is loud and clear. Hurry if you want to matter. Hurry if you want to succeed. Hurry if you want to belong. To reject this message and instead embrace slowness is to challenge the very rhythm of the world around us. It is to say, I will not be defined by your race. I will not be enslaved by your clock. I will not measure my worth by the pace of my steps. Think of a rushing river, its water tumbling forward with violence, carrying debris and noise, surging toward the sea without pause. Stand beside it and you feel the pull of chaos, the sense that you too must be swept along. Now picture a still mountain, solid, unmoving, grounded through centuries of storms and seasons. The mountain does not rush, yet it holds more power than the water that races by. To live with speed is to live like the river, restless, loud, exhausted. To live with slowness is to live like the mountain, steady, grounded, unshaken. One may roar, but the other endures. Slowness is not emptiness. Slowness is a sharpening of perception. When you pause long enough to see, colors grow brighter. The sky is no longer just blue. It becomes 1,000 shades shifting with the light. Flavors deepen when we chew slowly. Bread baked at home is not just food but a story of patience, warmth, and care. A sunrise witnessed in stillness is no longer just the beginning of a day. It is a miracle unfolding before our eyes. Laughter shared without hurry is not a sound we pass by but a melody that fills the heart. Slowness reveals the richness hidden in ordinary things, treasures overlooked by those sprinting past life. The truth is, most of the beauty in this world does not shout. It whispers. And you cannot hear a whisper while running. To rebel with slowness is to tune into the subtler frequencies of life, to notice the delicate fragrance of coffee rising in the morning, to taste the sweetness of fruit as if it were the first time, to watch the way light softens as it falls across a loved one's face. Slowness transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. But how do we begin this rebellion when the world around us refuses to stop? The answer lies in practices both simple and radical. One such practice is the art of slow eating. In a culture where meals are consumed in cars, at desks, or in front of glowing screens, to sit with food is to reclaim life. Slow eating is more than chewing deliberately. It is engaging all the senses, the colors of the vegetables, the texture of the bread, the fragrance rising from the plate. It is giving gratitude for the hands that planted, harvested, and prepared what is now before you. It is refusing to treat nourishment as a task to be completed and instead receiving it as a gift to be cherished. When we eat this way, even a humble meal becomes sacred. Another practice is the mindful conversation challenge. In most conversations, we listen not to understand but to reply. We hurry people through their words, interrupt with our opinions, rush toward conclusions. But imagine choosing instead to slow down, to look into someone's eyes fully, to wait until they finish speaking before you even begin to form a response, to listen with the whole body with patience and care. In such moments, conversations deepen. Trust blooms. The distance between two souls narrows. Mindful conversation is an act of love, and love requires slowness. This rebellion is not glamorous. It will not earn applause. In fact, the world may resist. People may misinterpret your slowness as weakness, your pauses as inefficiency, your stillness as lack of ambition. But to live slowly is not to withdraw from life. It is to enter it more fully. It is to recognize that we were not born to be machines, churning endlessly. We were born to be alive, to taste, to touch, to savor. To rebel with slowness is to reclaim sovereignty over your own existence. It is to say, I refuse to let my days dissolve into blur. I choose to live them in detail, in color, in presence. This rebellion is not loud, but it is powerful. It does not tear down systems, but it transforms lives. And in the quiet strength of this choice, a new kind of freedom emerges. The freedom to breathe deeply, to walk steadily, to love fully. The rushing river of society will always try to sweep us away, but we can choose to stand like the mountain. We can choose to be steady, unshaken, fully alive. And in that choice, in that gentle rebellion, we rediscover what it means to be human. Slowness is not falling behind. Slowness is finally catching up with life, with love, with ourselves. Part 9. Presence. The key to living fully. Presence is not just a word to be admired in philosophy books or meditation retreats. It is the very heartbeat of a life well lived. It has the power to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary, to turn routine into ritual, to breathe meaning into moments that would otherwise slip away unnoticed. When we live with presence, even the simplest acts, walking, eating, talking, become sacred expressions of being alive. Without presence, entire days vanish into a fog of repetition, leaving us with the ache of what might be called empty day syndrome, where the hours pass but nothing feels truly lived. Think of walking. For most adults, walking is mechanical, a way to get from one place to another as quickly as possible. We walk with our heads bowed to screens, our minds racing through tasks, our hearts elsewhere. But when presence is invited into each step, the act of walking becomes something different. The rhythm of the feet touching the ground syncs with the rhythm of the breath. The sound of leaves crunching underfoot becomes music. The sight of light shifting across buildings or trees becomes a reminder that the world is alive around us. Walking no longer belongs to the category of mundane tasks. It becomes a ritual of connection. The same is true of eating. In a hurried life, eating becomes refueling. We shovel food into our mouths while scrolling through news feeds, while checking emails, while barely tasting what sustains us. But when we eat with presence, a bite of bread becomes a miracle. We notice the warmth, the texture, the subtle flavors woven together. Gratitude arises, not just for the food itself, but for the unseen hands that grew, harvested, prepared, and brought it to our table. Eating becomes communion, not consumption. Even talking, something we do countless times a day, is transformed by presence. Without it, conversations skim the surface. We talk but do not connect. We listen only enough to prepare our reply. But with presence, talking becomes an exchange of souls. Eye contact lingers. Words are heard not only with the ears but with the heart. Silence is no longer awkward but a part of the dialogue. In such moments, conversations become rituals of intimacy, bridges that remind us we are not alone. Children show us this naturally. Watch a child marvel at a ladybug crawling across the sidewalk. Observe the delight in their eyes when they see raindrops sliding down a window or bubbles floating in the air. For them, the world is not ordinary. It is alive, shimmering, and full of wonder. But as adults, we lose this gift. We stop noticing. We trade off for efficiency. We walk past sunsets without a glance, dismiss laughter as background noise, let beauty blur into invisibility. Presence is the key that returns us to this childlike wonder. It teaches us to see again, to marvel again, to rediscover what we thought we had outgrown but had merely forgotten. This rediscovery is not abstract. It is practical, tangible, within reach. One simple practice can anchor it. Journaling 3 remembered moments each evening. At the end of the day, before you sleep, pause. Close your eyes and recall 3 moments when you were truly present. It may be as simple as the warmth of a cup of coffee in your hands, the sound of laughter during lunch, or the way the wind brushed your skin as you stepped outside. Write them down, not as a chore, but as a way of honoring the moments that mattered. Over time, this practice rewires the mind to seek presence. It trains us to notice throughout the day, because we know we will be called to remember. Life becomes less of a blur and more of a mosaic, each piece precious, each piece alive. The emotional impact of presence cannot be overstated. It deepens love. When we are truly present with someone we care about, they feel seen, heard, valued. Love grows not through grand gestures but through undivided attention in the small moments, holding a hand without distraction, listening without judgment, being fully there. Presence also nurtures gratitude. When we are attentive, we notice the blessings hidden in plain sight, the laughter of a friend, the softness of a pillow, the kindness of a stranger. Gratitude blossoms not in abundance but in awareness, and presence builds resilience. In hardship, the mind tends to spin into fear of the future or regret of the past, but presence anchors us in the now, showing us that in this very breath we are safe, capable, and alive. This anchor gives strength to endure storms without being carried away by them. Without presence, life becomes shallow. Days blend into weeks, weeks into years, and suddenly we find ourselves asking where the time went. But presence breaks this trance. It awakens us to the miracle of now. It reminds us that life is not measured by the number of breaths we take, but by the number of breaths we take consciously. It is not about how long we live, but how deeply we inhabit the time we are given. Presence is not something reserved for monks in monasteries or seekers on mountain tops. It belongs to all of us, parents folding laundry, workers commuting to offices, students waiting in line, friends sharing coffee. It belongs to the ordinary because it transforms the ordinary. Every person, no matter how hurried their world, can reclaim presence through intention, practice, and courage. To live fully is to live presently. It is to recognize that each step, each bite, each word, each breath is an invitation to awaken. Presence is the key. And when we hold it, life no longer passes us by. Life arrives. Life expands. Life becomes whole. Part 10: The Courage to Live Differently. There is a kind of courage rarely celebrated, a courage that does not look like the heroism of battlefields or the triumph of grand victories. It is quieter, subtler, and far more enduring. It is the courage to live differently, to choose calm in a world of chaos, to walk slowly while everyone else is running, to listen deeply when the world only wants to shout. In a culture where speed is glorified and busyness is mistaken for success, this courage looks almost like rebellion. It is not the courage to conquer the world, but to refuse to let the world conquer you. When we slow down, when we choose presence over hurry, we inevitably face misunderstanding. To a society addicted to acceleration, stillness appears as weakness. Friends may label you lazy. Colleagues may think you unambitious. Strangers may wonder why you are not rushing as they are. The current of urgency is so strong that anyone who dares to resist it is seen as strange, even suspect. Yet what is truly lazy? Racing through life without awareness, or daring to live each moment with intention? What is truly unambitious? Exhausting yourself for an endless ladder, or choosing a life of depth, love, and authenticity. There is a story told of a monk walking through Tokyo's busiest train station. Around him, thousands of commuters surged forward, eyes fixed, steps hurried, bodies weaving through the crowd like a river of urgency. Yet the monk walked slowly, deliberately, each step placed with care. People rushed past him, brushing against him, some even glaring at the disruption. But he remained steady, unaffected by the tide. In his slowness there was dignity. In his calm there was power. While the crowd moved like waves, he stood like the mountain. His presence was a reminder: it is possible to live differently, even in the heart of chaos. Patience is often dismissed as passivity, but in truth it is strength. It takes greater power to pause than to rush, greater courage to listen than to speak, greater resilience to stand steady than to be swept along. Authenticity, too, is power. To live true to your rhythm in a world that demands conformity is not weakness. It is one of the bravest choices you can make. In patience and authenticity, we find a new kind of victory, not over others, but over the illusions that enslave us. The courage to live differently is not about abandoning ambition or rejecting responsibility. It is about redefining success. It is about recognizing that life is not a scoreboard, not a contest to be won. Life is not something to win. It is something to live. And living does not happen in a blur of achievements. It happens in the still moments, the morning sun breaking through your window, the laughter shared with someone you love, the quiet breath that reminds you, you are alive here. Now, as we close this journey, let us return to the simple truth that has guided us. Urgency is an illusion. Presence is reality. The world will continue to demand speed, but you have the choice to walk differently. You have the choice to step out of the race, to reclaim your time, to live with courage, depth, and authenticity. This choice will not always be easy, but it will always be worth it. So carry this phrase with you, not as an idea, but as a vow, as a seed planted in your heart. I choose presence over hurry. Let it remind you when the tide pulls, when the noise rises, when the world insists you must run faster. Whisper it when you wake, breathe it when you are tempted to rush, hold it when you feel overwhelmed. Each time you repeat it, you return to yourself. Each time you live it, you reclaim your freedom. The courage to live differently begins with a single step, a single breath, a single choice. And once chosen, it reshapes everything. Presence becomes your compass, patience your strength, authenticity your power. And slowly, moment by moment, you discover the truth you were searching for all along. Life was never meant to be a race. It was meant to be lived, fully, deeply, here now. When we look back across this journey, from uncovering the hidden trap of urgency to embracing the courage to live differently, we begin to see how deeply our modern lives have been shaped by the illusion of speed. We began by asking a simple question: is urgency real, or is it something our minds have been trained to believe? And over the course of these reflections, stories, and lessons, we discovered that urgency is not reality but a story we carry, a lens that distorts, a habit that imprisons. We saw how cultural conditioning teaches us that busyness equals worth, how social comparisons magnify our sense of being behind, and how fear convinces us that slowing down means failure. We examined how time itself has been misunderstood, treated as an enemy to outrun rather than a sacred companion to walk with. We explored how hurry warps the mind, how anxiety and rush form a silent partnership, and how the illusion of control through speed leaves us scattered and fragile. We faced the cycle of exhaustion, the rebellion of slowing down, and the transformative power of presence. And finally, we acknowledged the courage required to live differently in a world that often misinterprets calm as weakness. What emerges from this entire journey is a truth as old as it is urgent. Life is not something to be chased. It is something to be lived. The miracle of life is not waiting at some finish line in the future. It is waiting here, in the breath we are taking right now, in the colors we see when we pause, in the laughter we hear when we listen fully, in the love we give when we are truly present. The tragedy is that in our rush to find life, we often miss it. The gift is that at any moment we can return. Presence, then, is not just a practice. It is a way of being. It transforms the way we walk, eat, speak, and love. It breaks the trance of empty day syndrome by filling each hour with depth. It heals the silent wound of exhaustion by reminding us that rest is not weakness but wisdom. It restores compassion by softening the lens through which we see others. It reconnects us with gratitude, resilience, and the childlike wonder that once came so naturally. And perhaps most importantly, presence is possible. It does not require perfect circumstances, silent retreats, or drastic lifestyle changes. It requires only the willingness to pause, to breathe, to notice. It requires us to choose awareness in the midst of noise, to choose patience when pressured to rush, to choose authenticity when tempted to conform. These choices may be small, but they are powerful. A single mindful breath can be more alive than a whole day of distraction. A single act of patient listening can restore a relationship. A single pause can change the entire rhythm of a life. So what do we do with this wisdom now? How do we apply it to the lives we are actually living, full of work, family, responsibilities, and endless demands? The answer is to begin where we are. We can practice micro pauses throughout the day, 5 breaths before a meeting, 30 seconds of stillness before sending an email, a moment of gratitude before each meal. We can set digital boundaries, creating sacred no-phone zones at our dining tables in our bedrooms or during our first waking hour. We can keep a simple journal, recording 3 remembered moments each evening, training our minds to notice presence. We can engage in mindful conversation, listening with patience instead of rushing to reply. These practices are not about abandoning ambition or withdrawing from society. They are about reclaiming our humanity within it. They remind us that progress without peace is hollow, that speed without meaning is empty, and that success without presence is not success at all. The deepest lesson we can take away is this: slowing down is not falling behind. It is catching up with life, with love, with ourselves. The courage to live differently lies not in chasing what the world demands, but in choosing what the soul needs. And what the soul needs always is presence. Life will continue to move. Deadlines will still exist, traffic will still fill the roads, and the world will still celebrate busyness. But now you know something most people have forgotten. You are not required to run the race. You are free to walk, free to pause, free to live at the rhythm of your own heart. And in that freedom lies the possibility of a life not rushed, but lived deeply, fully, joyfully. As we close, let me leave you with one phrase, one seed of truth to carry with you beyond these words. I choose presence over hurry. Say it aloud if you wish. Write it down. Hold it in your heart. Each time you repeat it, you step out of the illusion and return to reality. Each time you live it, you reclaim your life. Now I want to hear from you. How do you see the illusion of urgency in your own life? Where do you notice hurry stealing your peace? And what practices, what moments, help you return to presence? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective may be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if these reflections have resonated with you, if they have touched something inside you, please take a moment to subscribe to Buddhism in every moment. Your support gives us the strength and inspiration to continue creating content like this, content that does not just inform but transforms. Together, we can build a community of presence, compassion, and wisdom. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Remember, life is not something to win, it is something to live. And the way we live begins here in this moment.